When walls broke down, America's most shocking attack. Subscribe for more true crime. Like, comment, and help uncover the truth with us. April 15th, 2013. It was supposed to be a day of triumph. The Boston Marathon, one of America's proudest traditions. Thousands lined the streets, waving flags, cheering for runners crossing the finish line on Boylston Street. But at 2:49 p.m., that celebration turned into a nightmare. Without warning, a deafening explosion ripped through the crowd. Smoke filled the air. Panic spread like wildfire. Just seconds later, a second blast thundered down the block. The ground shook. Windows shattered. People screamed, ran, fell. In an instant, the finish line became a war zone. First responders raced in through clouds of gray smoke and chaos. Shattered limbs, bloodied sidewalks, abandoned strollers. No one knew what had happened, only that it wasn't an accident. Within minutes, the FBI took control. The city of Boston was locked down. "We're dealing with an act of terror," one official said grimly. The world watched in disbelief. Who could have done this, and why? As night fell, investigators began combing through thousands of photos, security videos, and witness reports. Somewhere in that chaos, they knew, were the faces of the bombers. The devices, crude but deadly pressure cookers packed with nails and ball bearings, were left inside backpacks. The evidence pointed to someone who had walked those same sidewalks, pretending to be part of the cheering crowd. In the days that followed, Boston transformed into a fortress. Officers searched door to door. Helicopters hovered above, and forensic experts worked around the clock. The FBI released 2 grainy images of men wearing baseball caps, one white, one black. The public now knew their names: Tamerlan and Jakar Tsarnaev. Brothers. Immigrants. Faces that had blended easily into the crowd now stared from every screen in America. Then came the first major break. On April 18th, the brothers carjacked a Mercedes SUV in Cambridge, telling the driver, "We did the marathon." The man escaped, and police were alerted. What followed was one of the most intense manhunts in U.S. history, a nighttime chase through the streets of Watertown, filled with gunfire, homemade explosives, and terror. By dawn, one brother lay dead. The other had vanished into the dark, armed and desperate. A wounded city held its breath, trapped in fear. Thousands of officers searched every house, every yard, every shadow. But when a homeowner finally lifted the tarp of his backyard boat that evening, he froze. There, inside, was a bloodied figure, breathing, watching, waiting. And when the red laser of a sniper's scope swept across that tarp, everything Boston had endured was about to come crashing down again. The neighborhood of Watertown was silent, except for the hum of helicopters circling overhead. Dozens of armed officers surrounded the backyard, their rifles aimed at a small white boat wrapped in a blood-stained tarp. Inside, they could see movement, a faint stir, a shadow shifting. The suspect, 19-year-old Jakar Tsarnaev, was cornered. After nearly 24 hours of lockdown, the entire city held its breath. Police used bullhorns to call out, urging him to surrender. No answer. Then, a gunshot cracked through the air. Officers unleashed a barrage of fire, shattering the silence. It was chaos, lights flashing, commands shouted, adrenaline surging. Finally, the gunfire stopped. A drone's thermal camera confirmed it. He was still alive. Bleeding, but alive. Carefully, officers moved in and pulled him from the boat. As they lifted his weak body onto the ground, the scene felt unreal. This teenager, barely out of high school, had just brought an entire city to its knees. He was rushed to Beth Israel Hospital under heavy guard. Across the city, people cheered. "Boston strong," the crowds chanted. But inside the FBI's investigation rooms, celebrations quickly turned into questions. How did 2 young men, seemingly ordinary, quiet, educated, become radicalized killers? What pushed them to carry out such an attack on innocent people? As agents dug deeper, a disturbing story emerged. Tamerlan, the older brother, had grown increasingly obsessed with extremist ideologies. He watched videos preaching violence, traveled to Russia for 6 months, and returned angrier, more withdrawn. Jakar, once a popular college student, followed his brother's lead. He wasn't the mastermind, but he was loyal. Fatally loyal. Investigators traced the bomb materials to local stores. The pressure cookers came from Macy's. The fireworks, filled with explosive powder, from a nearby shop in New Hampshire. Every receipt, every fragment, painted a chilling picture of premeditation. They had planned this together. As Jakar recovered from his injuries, federal agents prepared to interrogate him. His wounds were severe. A gunshot to the neck left him unable to speak clearly. But his handwritten notes told their own story. He claimed the attack was retribution for U.S. actions overseas, calling himself a soldier of Islam. His words sent chills through every investigator in the room. Yet even as the truth came into focus, one critical question remained. Did they act alone? Or was there someone else still out there, someone who had helped them build the bombs and vanish into the crowd? And just as authorities began to close in on the answer, an unexpected explosion ripped through a quiet neighborhood in Watertown. A small shed went up in flames, and inside, agents found something that changed the direction of the entire case. When firefighters arrived at the burning shed in Watertown, they expected an accident, maybe spilled fuel or faulty wiring. But what they found inside sent a shockwave through the investigation. Scattered across the charred floor were remnants of explosives, the same kind of pressure cookers, nails, and ball bearings used in the marathon bombing. It wasn't just a shed. It was a hidden workshop. Someone else had been there, and recently. The discovery reignited fears that another attack might be coming. Federal agents swarmed the scene, collecting every fragment, fingerprint, and trace of DNA. Late that night, one print came back. It belonged not to Jakar or Tamerlan, but to a man linked to Tamerlan's past. His name was Ibrahim Tadashev, an acquaintance from the local Chechen community in Florida. The FBI moved quickly to question him. In May 2013, agents visited Tadashev's Orlando apartment. They believed he might know more than he'd admitted. The interrogations stretched late into the night. At first, he denied everything, but under mounting pressure, he began to talk. He confessed that he and Tamerlan had once been involved in a triple murder 2 years earlier. 3 men found with their throats slit in Waltham, Massachusetts, on the very day of the 10th anniversary of September 11th. Then, just as he was about to sign his written statement, he lunged. In seconds, the room erupted in chaos. An FBI agent fired, killing him instantly. The case against the Tsarnaev brothers deepened. What began as an attack on the Boston Marathon now connected to earlier acts of violence, and possibly more. Prosecutors built their case meticulously, preparing for one of the most high-profile trials in modern American history. Jakar Tsarnaev faced 30 charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction. The evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage of him placing his backpack on the ground, eyewitness testimonies, forensic matches, and his chilling handwritten confession on the boat's wall. Stop killing our innocent people, and we will stop. In court, he appeared quiet, almost detached. Survivors testified about losing limbs, loved ones, and peace of mind. The atmosphere was heavy, each day reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. When the verdict came, the courtroom fell silent.
Guilty.
On every count. Moments later, the jury announced his sentence, death. Some cheered. Others wept. Boston was united in grief and justice, but divided on what true closure meant. Years later, the appeals began. Legal debates over his sentencing, questions about the influence of his brother, and the role of ideology kept the case alive in headlines. In 2020, a federal court overturned his death sentence, citing jury bias. But 2 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated it. The fight for justice, it seemed, would never fully end. Today, Jakar Tsarnaev sits in the high-security confines of ADX Florence, one of America's toughest prisons, locked away for 23 hours a day. The scars of that April afternoon, however, still run deep through Boston. Memorials line Boylston Street. Survivors rebuild their lives, step by step, many returning to run the marathon again, not in fear, but in defiance. Because when the walls of safety broke down that day, something else rose stronger, a city's will to stand tall. And though justice was served, one haunting truth remains. Sometimes, the greatest acts of evil come not from armies or nations, but from ordinary faces in a crowd. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what's coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss the next true story that shocked America.